welcome to Slash Forward. Imagine wanting something so bad you find yourself waiting 40 years for the chance to make your dream a reality. And then, after taking all the appropriate steps and precautions, you manage to get within a hair's breadth of achieving your goals, only to have some asshole lock you in a basement and set you on fire. Talk about a gut punch. Despite the depressing nature of this scenario, we'll be making preparations for welcoming the upcoming Halloween Kills movie into our eye holes by taking a look at the 2018 sequel to the original 1978 Halloween. Long after the residents of Haddonfield forgot about the old babysitter murders, and as a result of his therapeutic stagnation, Michael Myers is set to be transferred to a high-security facility where he may be crammed into a dark pit to live out the remainder of his days. In the intervening years, Laurie Strode has been solely focused on preparing herself for a presumed final showdown, even sacrificing her relationship with her daughter to make sure she stays on track. Will this be the final showdown? Who will survive? Let's take a look and see. Be sure to comment with your favorite Halloween timeline. And while you're here, check out some other fine selections from the channel's catalog. I've covered quite a few movies. Let's get to it. We open on the endless passage of time, a constant hindrance for the mentally infirm, relegated to passing each new moment as the last. Here, a couple of podcasters are looking to capitalize on the chance to interview Smith Grove's most infamous before he's transferred to a far less accommodating facility. They're escorted back by his caretaker, Dr. Sartain, whose obsessive study of Michael Myers is coming to an end as he's made no progress whatsoever. Michael has never even uttered a single word. They arrive during recess where the patients are graciously chained up outside so they can get a little vitamin D. After 40 years of inactivity, Aaron presumes he has what it takes to get inside as he comes bearing a precious gift. At the mere presence of the artifact, the air bristles with activity, riling up the inmates as Aaron eggs him on, thirsting for a response. We then transition to Haddonfield, as our guerrilla journalists try to build up some B-roll after an unsuccessful provocation. They're pressing forward, hoping to draw out Laurie Strode, who has since become a cagey survivalist loner, offering her a bag in exchange for a conversation. Still reluctant, she does let them in and sits down to talk. Dana tries to build up their credentials, hoping to earn trust and impressing upon her the importance of drawing insight from her travails. But all this fluffing about the importance of her story is little more than an irritant, and diving right into her losing custody of her daughter only pushes things over the line. Aaron goes for broke and reveals that what they really want is a sensationalist Strode Myers sit-down so the two enemies can try to hash out their differences, Ricky Lake style. In response to this revelation, she shows them the door. After that, we swoop in to meet Laurie's daughter Karen and her granddaughter Allison. Through the conversation, we find that Karen was able to adjust some appointments so that she'd be able to make it to Allison's National Honor Society event that evening, and that she and Ray are excited to meet her boyfriend Cameron. Then Allison hits her mom with a test, asking her if she invited Grandma like she said she would. She confirms that she did, failing the test with a clear lie, but one that she considers necessary in order to protect her precious daughter from her flaky mother. The lie is confirmed by Allison when, in discussing this issue with her friends on the way to school, she reveals that she actually invited her grandmother herself. But in fairness, it's a hard time of year for the family, being permanently haunted by the fateful events that, for everyone else, are now mostly local folklore. As a testament to the prevailing attitude, Dave wonders if it was even that big of a deal. I mean, it was one guy with a knife pulling in a low to moderate body count. We continue to familiarize ourselves with the friend group as Allison makes out with Cameron in the hallway. Then Buddy Oscar joins in, providing unsolicited kisses to his chums. As the day wears on, Laurie seeks to meet up with Allison in her own way. She's come to gift her the podcast money and encourage her to get out there and take life by the tail. But who is she to make such a suggestion? I mean, she's living like a hermit, constantly preparing for a disaster that's never happened, and has proved completely incapable of getting over her past. But Laurie relishes confrontation and admits that she would take on all the hate if it means having a daughter who's tough as nails and ready to take on the world. She then goes back to where everything feels right, at her stronghold with her weapons, which she cares for as if they were her own appendages. Then, later that evening, we see the casters working through some of their research, hoping to find a good hook by listening to old tapes from Dr. Loomis. Meanwhile, it's transfer time at the Funny Farm, where a huge batch of loonies get loaded up, including Dr. Sartain. As the one primarily responsible for the most dangerous patient, he wants to oversee the proceedings. But outside, they also have a guardian angel in Laurie Strode, who sees them off with a blood-curdling scream. While back at Chili's, the gang is slamming some appetizers and getting intimately acquainted with Cameron. They high-five over the jalapeno poppers and bottomless margs, as Lori arrives to check in on the festivities and blow off some steam before formally joining them for dinner. She adds to the conversation by openly sobbing and lamenting her hesitance in killing Michael when given the chance. Allison learns that Karen's hesitance to include Grandma over the years wasn't necessarily unreasonable. She runs off to try to provide whatever comfort she can, but does she even understand? Not at all, we see when Karen takes a minute to flash back and reveal the absurd circumstances of her childhood spent prepping in various ways, right up until CPS came and took her away. Resentful of Lori's attempt to protect her by training her for the inevitable, she made it her goal to protect Allison by shielding her from the horrors of life. You know, we all have our own ideas about the best way to parent. Who's to say what's best? Back out on the county roads, a father and son discuss the merits of hunting and fishing versus expressing oneself through the art of dance. Before finding a resolution, the pair runs across a busload of wandering psychos. After his dad goes to check it out, Lumpy calls 911. Unfortunately, they really do need some more information, so he's sent to wade into the darkness and try to get a handle on things. He approaches slowly, rifle at the ready, and has the pleasure of poking at his first nearly dead man, who warns him to run. But he carries on and soon runs across Dr. Sartain, who tries to startle him into not shooting, resulting in the opposite outcome. There are so many novel experiences for a young man going down this evening, and if only he had left the keys, he might have been able to share these stories with someone someday. But he won't. Officer Hawkins gets the call and rushes right out there to poke around. The party is mostly dispersed at this point, but he still takes it slow and steady, due to all the dead bodies. He finds the doctor at death's door, mostly concerned about whether he escaped.
Did who escape?
We may never know. The next day, Aaron and Dana take a quick visit to the grave of Judith Myers and instantly erupt into melodramatic narrative, apparently for the sole benefit of the groundskeeper. While at Haddonfield Memorial, Sheriff Barker strolls in to report that most of the patients are accounted for, but none of them are able to relay a comprehensible account of what transpired. The only useful information is Hawkins' recognition that the bus manifest has Michael Myers' name on it. Elsewhere, as our podcast journalists fuel up, we see a familiar shape creeping around and committing violence in the background. Dana takes a little time for herself in the loo when she's alarmed by some heavy footfalls and the sound of stall checks, which is revealed to be a man with no respect for privacy. Out at the shop, Aaron goes to settle up, coming face to face with the violence, cluing him in on the situation in which he finds himself. While back at the stall, Michael attempts to buy his way in with a handful of bloody chiclets, causing Dana to immediately salamander into an adjacent stall where she's granted a few moments by Aaron, who bursts in to confront a now unbounded Michael. He has a crowbar but lacks the necessary blackness in his heart to commit violence. The end result is his face getting turned into mashed potatoes all over the bathroom. When he returns to Dana, she does little to earn her freedom, and so she dies. Then Michael goes out to pop the trunk and reunites face with Mask, the true flesh. Then the news hits Lori, who immediately begins lockdown and descends into her panic room for phase 1 of preparations. This includes, we come to learn, forcibly entering Karen's home to see if she's remembered her lessons. She has not, and so she's chastised for her laziness. Regardless, they brush off her massacre preparation warnings in favor of preparing dinner. Back at the station, the boys are just now catching up with the path of destruction. The gravity of the situation now confirmed. With the pieces in place, we now arrive in Haddonfield on Halloween. Michael makes a quick appearance before dipping out to find the secret Candy. He glides on into the first house, and Candy desires unfulfilled, he trades hammer for knife. On his way out, he ponders, what do babies think about? Before hitting the busy strip. His goal here is quite simple. Drop in and out of the shadows, finding potential victims and turning them into actual victims. At the dance, the special secret of the Bonnie and Clyde couple's costume is revealed to be a contravention of heterotypic gender norms. A pretty low-tier rebellious statement for high schoolers these days. They head in where the kids are just bebopping all over the place. Allison takes a quick call from Vicky, who's stuck babysitting, and invites them over to smoke some reefer after the party. Despite her coded language, Julian is savvy, and he knows exactly what the teens are up to, earning him an early bedtime. Back at the gymnasium, Allison returns to find that Cameron couldn't go a full 2 minutes without being the focus of female sexual attraction. He tries to convince Allison that he's really a nice guy, and then, like all nice guys, he doubles down by blaming his behavior on her phone attentiveness in an overly dramatic manner.
You gonna get that? Or you want me to get it?
Got her! Out in town, Lori is cruising the streets listening to a police scanner, while by happenstance, Michael arrives at Julian's home where Vicky is busy cleaning the largest knife possible. Then Dave arrives and shows off his commemorative tattoo, which earns him a dry hump session. So they get right down to business, writhing around on the couch. but Vicky is distracted by a noise. Before David can go check, Julian jumps out to warn them about the bogeyman, an obvious childish lie. Vicky agrees to go check it out. After finding nothing, she puts him back to bed. His final request is to close the closet door, which doesn't seem to want to close. Oh, there's a man in there. He drags her into the room for stabbing, while Dave summons the courage to come to her rescue, taking up the blade only after the screaming is stopped. The call goes out for a domestic disturbance, and they spring into action. Hawkins arrives on scene first and finds the back door open, so he proceeds inward, announcing himself but receiving no reply. He goes upstairs and finds a suspicious figure covered by a sheet, which he hopes to be able to pull back without getting stabbed. He's successful, as it's Vicky under there. Lori arrives and takes a more active approach up front. She clears the streets and sees Michael 2 windows down from Hawkins. While her aim is true, the shot does not find its target. Michael then casually strolls out with Hawkins in pursuit, but he's delayed by the discovery of Dave pinned to the wall. Lori catches up with him and manages to graze his neck, which doesn't faze him. She and Frank then meet up, 2 traumatized old-timers who bore witness to the 1978 massacre. As they sort through the scene, Sheriff Barker arrives with Dr. Sartain, now cognizant and eager to spill the beans. The 2 officers have a dispute about whether he's an asset or a liability, but he did warn them that Michael will kill again, and that's some hot info. Then Lori chimes in to suggest action, bringing the doctor to his feet as she represents a nut he sure would like to crack. While the rest of the town is on lockdown, we transition to Oscar escorting Allison, the coolest, nicest, prettiest girl in school, who deserves so much better than Cameron. After dropping that hot little nugget, he invites her to take a shortcut with him. Meanwhile, Hawkins and Sartain are cruising the streets with their eyes peeled. Through this conversation, Dr. Sartain gives some indications that he's a real freak who would take great pleasure from diving deep into Michael's mind and swimming around in there, likely while naked. While they're out, they all pull up to Allison's house to drop a huge flaming bag of reality on her doorstep. In their attempts to reach her, we learn that the plan is to barricade themselves at Granny Strode's house. Back with the kids, we see Oscar's shortcut consisted of cutting across 1 yard, and that by Allison deserving better, he was referring to his mouth being on her mouth. Good guy Oscar then cowers in the face of rejection, groveling on the ground and unloading all his troubles into the uncaring darkness, which he believes to be occupied by the homeowner. But he soon finds out that it is not. Of course, after the stunt he pulled, Allison's not fallen for his silly games, so he dies screaming, stabbed in the back with his jaw impaled on a picket. That Allison believes in, catching her up now with the rest of us. And in an unusual twist, she manages to run screaming and actually find someone willing to administer assistance. Hawkins soon arrives and Sartain hops out to soak in all the first-hand Michael Myers experiences. As they head out to the Strode stronghold, Hawkins gets eyes on your boy and risks a full-on Ben Tramer fiasco in order to put an end to the terror. Unfortunately, Dr. Sartain takes his custodial responsibilities very seriously and intervenes to prevent the kill shot. In a shocking twist, he goes one step further, brandishing his trusty penknife and murdering Hawkins. Honestly, he's never felt closer with his patient. They may really be in a position to make some progress here. Then he loads him up with Allison and announces his hunch that Michael's compulsion to hunt Lori is what keeps him alive. He further explains that he's really keen to hear Michael's husky voice whisper something into his ear. Seeing an opportunity to gain some leverage, Allison claims that Michael spoke to her, and she'll tell him, but only if he lets her out. You know he's got to find out, so he pulls over and tries to compel her to say what she heard. But Michael wakes up and puts an end to that. He drags him out, and after begging for just a single word, he instead performs a single action. Allison also runs off, which all happens just down the road from the Strode house, attracting the attention of the officers keeping guard. They approach cautiously, but find nothing. As the house is prepped, Ray pauses his yo-yoing when he notices the police cruiser parked out front. He goes to see how things are going, but finds the men to be unwell, although that is a subjective assessment. At any rate, Ray will take this experience to the grave, as he is then dragged deep into the murky darkness, firing his gun flaccidly into the dark. Lori calls out, and then Hunter and Prey tingle with excitement as the big moment approaches. It unfortunately starts with Lori, after 40 years of preparations, standing next to a window. It very nearly ends here, except she happens to just be built different. She runs down to the panic room to hit the lights as Michael makes his way in. Lori then ventures up to try and finish what she started. She works her way through room by room, clearing them and locking them down. She follows a blood trail that leads upstairs and eventually finds herself in the mannequin room, so who knows what's what. Sure enough, he pops out and guts her before tossing her over the balcony. He's distracted momentarily by Allison's arrival, allowing Lori to disappear. Karen pops out real quick to hurry her downstairs, where they wait with bated breath as Michael puzzles through the situation. When he gets it, Karen goes to grab her old trusty, but when it comes down to it, she loses her resolve and calls out for Mommy to save her.
Gotcha.
Psych! Laurie does come out then and beans Michael, sending him rolling into the basement. As the ladies run out, Michael snags Karen's ankle. This gives Allison a chance to draw blood, an important rite of passage. We then learn that the stronghold that was presented as Laurie's prison was actually a trap for Michael. After he's captured, Laurie hits the gas and pilot lights. Then she tosses him a farewell road flare. But as the house violently erupts into flames, Michael seems nonplussed. Then the three survivors run out to the road and find help from a simple chicken farmer and ride off into the night. For this post-story wrap-up, I have a few thoughts about this movie, but then some nitpicks to make from a how-to-beat perspective, because these survivalist aspects of this movie seem ripe for the picking. Personally, I like this one a lot. I know there are some issues with it, but I think the general audience critique tends to go too far in terms of its derision over what they're trying to do here. I really enjoy the Halloween franchise overall, despite its multitude of various timelines you have to keep up with. But while anchored by one of the best horror films of all time, the series' quality is very inconsistent. I recently rewatched parts 4 and 5 purely for pleasure, which may seem weird, but I like them, although they're really not great. If I could make a timely reference, part 4's Michael looks like he was played by Pat from Saturday Night Live. What I'm saying is, even if 2018 didn't work for you, in comparison to the series, it is one of the better ones, objectively. One of the things I did like was the direction they took it in regards to presenting the what-if scenario of looking at the original survivors 40 years later and basing the story around the wreckage left by the original trauma. It had similar vibes to Rob Zombie's sequel in that regard, just with a far less depressing and dark tone. I will say that one reason I'm able to derive so much pleasure from the nonsensical is that my natural state when taking in movies is to go brain off. I never find myself trying to solve a mystery presented to me on screen, for instance. So provide some cool visuals, reasonable plot points, and some sweet payoffs, and I'm all good. This film delivers in that regard. However, I can't go brain off when I'm taking script notes, which churned up quite a few issues for me, specifically in regards to how they handled and presented Laurie's survivalism in the film. Realistically, it starts out fairly tame, with little to object to. She likes popping off rounds in her backyard, making her own preserves, and maintaining a well-stocked panic room. All pretty standard stuff. It's when they ramp things up and show how far she's actually taken it that things begin to fall apart. If you've seen this film before and you weren't unsettled by the fact that she rested up against the door with 2 windows in it, you have a steely constitution. Decisions aside, why does her forest stronghold have a door with windows to begin with? Furthermore, why on earth would you set up a system that requires you to bodily move through the home to check and clear all the rooms in order to manually hit the door buttons, which are right outside the rooms? These are, of course, rhetorical questions. The answer to this is that you would not, if you were worth your salt in an emergency prep situation. She has cameras, wired up a bitchin' light system, and had an automated kitchen island, among other contraptions. These skills should be put to good use by creating a system whereby the operator would be able to utilize a central system to power the doors and activate them all at once or individually. I assume the purpose here is to limit Michael's movement, prevent the possibility of escape, and focus the eventual fire into the core of the home. I'm on board with that, but it was implemented sloppily and dangerously. With all that time to prepare and build a home around a trap with such a specific singular purpose, you should really be focusing on developing a fail-safe way of getting Michael into the basement and lighting it up. And just think for a moment, for the purpose of the plot, all this stuff happened at the stairwell to the basement, but it was a stairwell that was intentionally hidden, and when the time came, there were some uncomfortable path crossings back and forth to get him in and them out. So many things would have to go just right to accomplish this and get out without suffering losses. It seems like a far shot. I suppose it is possible that he was intended to be contained to the main portion of the house, with the basement as a backup. However, the way they bladed him in like that really made it seem like that was the end goal. This is supported by the incendiary devices contained therein, which were controlled from outside of that room. Again, the argument could be made that these are all backup systems with built-in redundancies to ensure success. I would still contend that if this is the case, it would be preferable to come up with a better way to achieve the ultimate goal. If you really want to go deep into the level of chess being played here by Laurie, you could also say that the door situation was somewhat intentional, in that she wanted to maintain a strong prison barrier but with some manner of ingress available to ensure Michael can enter the trap, but with the unintended side effect of getting her face smashed up. Even if that were the case, it still calls the method into question, because once he comes in, they still have to get him into the basement that they occupy. While I acknowledge that it's an important part of the story arc to have Allison get blood on her hands to ensure that none of the 3 generations are innocent for whatever's going to come in the sequel, all that trauma, suffering, and uncertainty could have been avoided with the most basic ambush device, the trapdoor. Michael enters, he falls, and then he gets burned up, clean, easy, and it gets the job done. Although, with the house now turned to ash, this shouldn't pose any issues in the sequel, so that's a promising starting point. Before we go, I'd like to give a huge thanks to my donors memorialized in the Hall of Headshots. I have a website set up where you can support the channel through donations or merch. Any donation unlocks uncensored movie reviews of Life Force, Under the Skin, and Possessor, with others to be added over time. And if you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.